Hi friends, Julia here with a GMAT verbal tip. When reading passages or arguments, the goal is to understand how far the author is going and how far would be past the passage or too extreme or unsupported. Inferences in both critical reasoning and reading comprehension questions rely on understanding the level of support the passage is actually offering. Doing well on these questions also requires flexibility for how concepts are phrased or portrayed. If we read our answer choices with too much rigidity, it can lead to overlooking correct answers simply because they don't match the passage in exactly the way we're expecting. The GMAT is sophisticated, so it isn't going to use the exact same wording in the passage and the answer choices, or it would be far too easy. I'm going to work through a TTP example that demonstrates the sort of flexibility in language that is valuable to prepare for. A use-by date on a food item is meant to indicate the last day on which the food should be consumed. In contrast, a sell-by date is nearly the last day on which a food item should be sold. In most cases, food with a sell-by date is expected to be good for consumption for a period of time after the sell-by date. Nevertheless, consumers who do not understand this distinction often discard food that is good for consumption upon seeing that the sell-by date on the food has passed. If the statement is ever true, which of the following can be properly inferred from them? In many cases, food marked with a use-by date is still good for consumption for a period of time after that date. This isn't supported according to sentence 1, which says that the use-by date is the last date the food should be consumed. So this is not a good inference. On food items marked with both sell-by and use-by dates, the sell-by dates always precede the use-by dates. This is tempting, but notice that sentence 3 says that in most cases, food with a sell-by date is expected to be good for a period after the sell-by date. There could be cases where the dates are the same, so this choice, even if it's probably true, isn't definitely true. It's not a good inference. C, people generally pay more attention to use-by dates on food than to sell-by dates on food. There's nothing in the passage to suggest this. If anything, sentence 4 would suggest the opposite is the case for consumers who don't understand the distinction between sell-by and use-by dates because they are throwing away their food based on the sell-by date. Sometimes marking food with sell-by dates results in food going to waste. Let's look back at our final sentence. Consumers who do not understand this distinction often discard food that is good for consumption upon seeing that the sell-by date on the food has passed. If consumers who don't understand the distinction between sell-by and use-by are a large part of the market, of the total market of food consumers, then that means that this is happening often. If consumers who don't understand the distinction are a relatively small portion of the total market of consumers, this could be happening not terribly often overall, even if it happens often for this particular subgroup. We don't really know how big this subgroup is. So by using the term sometimes, it's much easier to get to a fully supported inference. We know that it's happening some of the time. It's not never happening. Through toning down from often to sometimes, this inference is fully supported. And finally, E. When people are shopping, they often use sell-by dates as indicators of the freshness of food items that they are considering purchasing. This may be true in the real world, it probably is, but it is not fully supported by the passage. remember to operate in the confines of the passage, which will typically be pretty limited. No over-inferring and no outside biases. If you went into that example expecting the word often to apply to sell-by-date related food waste, then you might have ruled out the correct answer. Here's a visualization of the relative restrictiveness of terms. You can always go less restrictive, but you should never go more restrictive than the passage. For instance, something that happens often also happens sometimes, but something that happens sometimes doesn't necessarily happen often. Or something that happens rarely also happens sometimes, because sometimes just means some of the times, not never and not always, but somewhere in between. But something that happens sometimes cannot be inferred to happen only rarely. It could happen half of the time, it could happen usually, it could happen almost all of the time. We don't know. Be careful to not over-infer and go past what is supported and pick a term that is more restrictive than the term used in the passage. So remember to be flexible in how the answers can appear, and do not rule something out simply because it doesn't perfectly match the phrasing of the passage, as long as it matches the content and support level of the passage. Good luck on your studies.